Hey students, welcome to this week's presentation on our topic all about art. My name is Steve Kimmel, the instructor of the KEC Early Childhood Education course. One thing we're going to focus on this week is the difference between process and product art. And I've taken a lot of these from this How Process-Focused Art Experiences Support Preschoolers by Laurel Bongiaro from Young Children magazine. So I would encourage you to check it out if you're interested. On the Google Slides, this underlined thing is a link that you can follow if you're so interested. Next is a 5-minute video by somebody named Lisa Murphy. She is referred to as the Ooey Gooey lady because she's really into art for young children. Again, I would encourage you to go to the Google Slides format of this, and you can click on this and watch the 5-minute video by Lisa. So, process-focused art experiences, what are they all about? First of all, there are no step-by-step instructions. So the teacher's not telling children how to do the art. The children are just able to do the art using the materials as they wish to use the materials. There's no sample for children to follow. So I'm not showing them a product and saying, make one just like this. I'm simply giving them the materials for them to use according to their own interest and creativity. There's no right way or no wrong way to explore and create. Children have the freedom to create as they wish. They can focus on the process of the art themselves. The art is unique and original. You're not going to see any two pictures that are exactly the same because each child is creating using the materials themselves based on what they want to do with the materials. The art is focused on the experience and on the exploration of techniques, tools, and materials. So the focus on the experience is what's most important. Children using the paintbrush and holding the paintbrush and developing the fine motor skills to use that paintbrush is important. Using the paintbrush to make little marks or big marks, that's what's important. So they're going to explore the materials and the tools and the techniques all on their own in process-focused art. The experience is relaxing or calming. It's an enjoyable thing because you're able to do what you want to do with the materials that have been provided. The art is entirely the child's own. So again, no one is telling them what to do it. They're creating based on their own creativity and their own interest using the materials that have been provided. The art experience is a child's choice. So we're not requiring the child to do art. We're making it inviting and interesting and hoping that the child will come and do some art, but it is a choice that we are offering to them. So when children are doing process-focused art, these are some things that they may say. They may say, look what I made. I'm going to make another, and can I have more time? They're interested, they're having fun, they're going to want more time to use the materials, more time to explore and create. I now want to contrast what we learned about process-focused art with product-focused art activities. With these things, children have instructions to follow. The teacher may say, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and give them specific instructions for students to follow. The teacher likely created a sample for children to follow. He or she may hang this up in front of the classroom so each child can see just what they are supposed to make following the example that is provided. There is definitely a right way and a wrong way for children to proceed. They're to use the materials in the specified way. There's a finished product in mind. The teacher actually showed the sample of that finished product, and that's what the teacher wants for each child to create. So that finished product is definitely in the teacher's mind, and she placed it in the child's mind. The children's finished artwork all looks the same. There may be minor differences between the artwork, but all in all, they're all going to look very much the same as each other. When children do a product-focused art, they may experience frustration. They obviously don't have the skills of the teacher that had when creating the thing, so they're going to feel experience when they or frustration when they can't do one just like the teacher. The teacher might go ahead and fix mistakes. This might happen in the child's presence, or this might happen after the children are finished, where the teacher goes and moves things around or does whatever she or he needs to do to fix any mistakes that the child may have made. Another thing about product-focused art is the whole class took part in the art project at one time. So in this kind of classroom, all the teachers or all the children have to come to the art area, all of them have to sit down, and all of them have to do the activity at the exact same time, really so the teacher can direct what they are doing. Some things we might hear children say when they're required to do product-focused art is, "Can I be done now?" Or, "Is this right?" Or, "I can't do it." Or, "Mine doesn't look like yours." So remember what we talked about, how children might be frustrated. They might say, "I can't do it. Mine doesn't look like yours." They're just not living up to what the teacher has done. I once worked in a classroom where art was product focused and it was required, and each child had to come over and do an art activity. They didn't have to do it at the same time, but they were required to do an art activity. And I'll never forget, one child came over, sat down, took out a crayon and just made a quick squiggle and then moved back to the block area. So this child obviously did not want to do the art, was not interested one way at all, but came to do it just because the teacher had required that all children do the art activity. So now we're going to do an art example quiz. We're going to look at the following works of art, and we're going to decide if this is a process or a product art activity. So the first one shown here looks like there are some feathers, actually a feather duster. The child must have dipped that in some paint and then put it on their paper. So what do you think, process or product? I would say this one definitely falls into the process because no two pictures are going to look the same, and the child creates using the materials as they wish. Here we see, I believe them to be Christmas trees. So it looks like there's a paper plate that's cut in a wedge form and then some little puffy balls that get glued onto that. So would you say this is process or product? Well, the fact that we see two that are very similar, I would say that this is product. And the teacher probably did provide an example for children to follow, showing them just how to do this, and probably even coached them as far as how to put glue on the ball and how to put the ball on the tree. Next one shown here is corn painting, and it looks like there's some corn on the cobs, maybe those little handle things that go into the corn on the cob, some paint, and then children paint with a corn on the cob as a different kind of paintbrush. So would you say that this one is process or product? I agree. I think this one is process. No two pictures are going to look exactly the same, and the child is really just exploring. They probably never painted with corn on the cob before. So one thing to toss in here is that there are very different opinions on whether you should do art activities using something like food. So I'm not sure exactly where I land on that debate, but in this one, obviously, they're using something that could have been used as food. However, it is used for painting. I guess if it's field corn, it would be used for animal food, but nonetheless, there is some controversy over using food as part of art. Next one here shows a cute little bear. This one's pretty obvious. Would you say it's process or product? I would agree that this is product. So again, the teacher probably had a pre-cut head, a pre-cut neck, pre-cut noses, and eyes, etc., and probably put the example up in front of the children. And their job was to replicate what the teacher had done simply by gluing things on, kind of assembling it together. So this would be product focused, and this could lead to some frustration for kids because they might have a hard time making it look just like this one did, and it also really hampers their creativity because they have to make it just like the teacher's was. This one is called Painting with Circles, and I think what we see up there is a styrofoam cup. It looks like the child must dip the cup in the paint and then kind of drop the cup down on a piece of paper and make those circles. So it creates kind of a cool looking product, neat to look at. Would you say this is process or product oriented? Well, I would say that this one is process oriented because the teacher's not telling children what to do. The cup and the things kind of imply what you do with it, but I've done art experiences like this before, thinking that children were going to take the cup and put it down in nice, neat circles, and instead they use it more as a paintbrush and move it around. So this is definitely a process-oriented art activity. This one I came across and it looks kind of fun. It looks like there's a squirt gun. Looks like maybe grass in the background, so this is done outside, which would be wise. And it looks like maybe the squirt gun has perhaps some different colors of really watered down paint in it, and the child sprays it on the paper. So this one, I think, would be a process-oriented art activity. The child is developing some fine motor skills, I guess, in squeezing the trigger of the squirt gun and kind of creating a picture that looks like they want it to look. Here we have a cute little lion with some googly eyes and some grass down below. Now that we've done this a few times, I would imagine that you're probably saying that this is product-oriented art. Again, the teacher took a lot of time beforehand to cut out all those shapes. A child would definitely not have the fine motor skills to cut out those shapes. So the teacher probably cut out the shapes, put them on a table, put an example for children to follow, and then the children went ahead and created a lion. Cute, neat looking, but definitely product-oriented art. Here we see another product-oriented art thing. This one is a watermelon. Same kind of thing where the teacher probably spent a lot of time pre-cutting things so that the children would have them ready to use. As you will learn, if you are a teacher someday, time is a very precious thing, and it's really a waste of a teacher's time to be pre-cutting all these things out when he or she could be planning other activities where children really can learn through play, really can learn through experimenting, and really focusing on the product or the process. In this one, I see various, looks like kind of kitchen utensils, maybe potato mashers. I think that's what those are called. And this one is a process or product. Um, And up on the little sheet of paper, we see it says process art with kids. So I guess the answer is provided for us. But this looks like a fun activity where kids can just use the utensil that's provided for them, use plates that have paint on them, and then just take and stamp away on their paper. So looks like it could get kind of messy, kind of crazy, but looks like a neat process-oriented art activity. This is something where I could definitely hear children saying, can I have more time? I see this as something that children would really get into, and it's definitely a process-oriented art activity. Potato masher snowman. So very interesting how this one also uses potato mashers. But did you notice how there are three snowmen that look pretty similar? This one I'm thinking that the teacher had the idea of making it process oriented, but then struggled with that and perhaps gave an example for children. May have also given some pre-cut noses and pre-cut hats for the children to use. So I think this one really illustrates that the potato masher is something that could be used for a product-oriented art or a process-oriented art. Here we see little rollers. Sometimes these rolling pins are used for Play-Doh, for making the Play-Doh nice and flat so you can do stuff with it. And in this one, it looks like somebody has put bubble wrap on the rollers so the kids kind of roll it into some paint and then perhaps go and put it on a piece of paper. One thing to remember with art is that you can do small pieces of paper where each child has their own, or you could take a big rectangular table and put a great big sheet of paper on it so kids could do art together. So different ways of doing it depending on how you want to do it. So this looks like a fun activity that definitely the children would get into and also would probably want to do it for a long time. Another good thing with this one is it's really developing the fine muscle skills as children are figuring out how to hold on to the paint roller and just how to paint with it. Here we have a turkey, and I think this one's pretty obvious as well. This one's interesting as well because it looks like in the upper left-hand corner there are some sponges, and the sponge painting is a process thing where the child could take the sponges and they could make whatever they wanted to make on a piece of paper if the teacher left it open to be process-oriented art. However, in this one, the teacher probably gave them the paper plate, gave them the example of what to make, gave them the googly eyes, the pre-cut turkey's head and nose and whatever that red thing is called, and said, this is what we're making today. So all the children would make something, and it would probably look like this. One of the interesting things about art is that we have to help parents to understand how process-oriented art is really best for child development. Parents love when things come home that they can hang on the refrigerator that are recognizable because this is perhaps what they did when they were a child. But when we've done research, we really see that the process is what kids need so they can develop creativity skills and learn how to use materials in unique ways. So one part of what we do as early childhood teachers is to help parents learn about child development. And we could have some stuff on process-oriented art. I recall we had a family night called an Evening of Art, and when parents came with children, we had process art activities set up all over our classrooms. So each table that we had a different process art activity. They all focused on the process, and then parents got to do these with children. And that was an interesting thing because parents got to see how children enjoyed the freedom of using the materials in whatever creative way that they wanted to. Parents also got to create alongside their child, so they got to see that. We also provided some written materials for parents just to help them learn about child development and learn the importance of process-oriented art. Here we see, it looks like kind of some bubble wrap again. Perhaps the bubble wrap was hooked to some little round blocks or something like that. And again, the children got to dip the bubble wrap things in some paint and got to use them on paper. And here we see something interesting because the child is using them in different ways. If you or I did this, we might just go up and down and up and down and up and down and create simple circles based on the bubble wrap. And this way the child did some of that. And then they also did some smear painting where they were kind of moving things around on their picture. So a couple different ways that they were able to do it, a couple different processes that they could follow. This one is good for winter, obviously, snow paint, and it looks to me like the teacher has filled a plastic tray with some snow brought in from outside and some paintbrushes and some paint cups, and kids can paint away at that. So that looks kind of fun. Again, we would say that this is a process oriented because the teacher's not telling the kids what to do, but providing stuff for them to use to make art themselves. I've also seen snow paint where it's had some little spray bottles filled with different colors of paint, and the children can use them in that way. So snow paint, a fun process-oriented art project. And obviously, this is something that kids aren't going to be able to take home, and that's okay. Sometimes we just want to explore the process, we just want to have fun together creating. This is a neat social situation as you see the kids sitting next to each other, kind of working together, doing snow painting. Another turkey. You can see I was building this presentation around the holidays, and this one came up on Pinterest. So this one has the kids probably they may have made those little rolls that you see, but definitely the teacher provided them with a paper plate that was cut, had the circle cut out in the center just so they could all make turkeys. And I could just picture this bulletin board in the classroom filled with things that look very much the same. And we don't want children to have to be identical to each other. We want to welcome and appreciate children's diversity. So just as all children are different, all of their art should be able to look different as well. This one, they called it Painted Roads Transportation Art. So let's take a look at this one. We see some Duplos. Duplos is the fancy name for larger Legos. Legos are the small bricks and Duplos are the larger bricks. So they have a train here or some cars down at the bottom, and it looks like they dipped that in some paint and then they drove on some paper. So what would you think? Process or product for this one? Okay, I would agree that this one is process-oriented art. And just a couple things about this one. If you had a little bitty piece of paper, this isn't going to work very well. It's going to be frustrating for children. So this one, I would imagine that there's a big piece of paper on the table, and the kids get to drive themselves. Again, this isn't something that one child could take home. I suppose you could cut it up into different parts when they're finished, and each child could take a portion of the road home. But this is one where it was the experience doing it together and just experimenting with how this works that was good for children's development. Sensory stomp painting. So this one, I see some feet. I see some bare feet on there, and not really sure what they're doing, but I see some bubble wrap and I see some colors. So I would imagine that perhaps the teacher put some globs of paint on a piece of paper, then put some bubble wrap on, and then said, let's go for it. Let's stomp on these bubbles and kind of create something neat looking. A couple things to bring up here is that when you're doing art, sometimes you want to put some music to the art. The music might set a kind of a calming atmosphere, or it might set an exciting atmosphere, depending on the music that you would choose. The other thing that I see cool here is that we see color blending. Color blending is science. We all know, because we have experience, what happens when you mix red and yellow together. Here we're seeing what happens when blue and yellow get mixed together, and it makes green, makes different shades of green depending on how much yellow is in that and how much blue is in that. So that would be a great conversation to have with kids, to say, where did this green come from? I didn't give you green paint. How did you make green? And so this would be a great conversation that you could have. And then you could continue that conversation with, why do I see some light green and some dark green? Tell me just how that happened. So kids have to think through and use their cognitive skills as they're trying to figure this out. That definitely looks like a fun activity to try. All right. So I thank you for joining me on that little quiz. Um, Next, we're going to talk about, what do children learn through process-oriented art? And we've talked about a few examples as we went through those examples before. But what are they going to learn socially and emotionally? When children do process-oriented art, they relax, they focus, they feel successful, and they can express their feelings. So these are all important social emotional parts about doing art. Language and literacy. Children may choose to discuss their art or add print to it on their own or by dictating to a teacher. So a child may be making something, and I might ask an open-ended question saying, tell me about what you just made. And they may see something in that picture and want to have a great story about that. So they may want to say, they may want to dictate this to me. So I could say, how about you tell me your words and I'm going to write them down here so your mom or your dad or your family may read and know about what you have made. So language and literacy is a big thing in process-oriented art. Cognitive. Children compare, predict, plan, and problem solve. So children might get into planning just how they want to use the materials, what color they want to use first, second, third, and fourth. They may problem solve. They may, I'm thinking back to that rolling pin art activity. Children may have tried to hold the rolling pin in a different way and it didn't quite work right. So then they had to solve the problem to figure out how to make it work for them. And children are going to use words to describe their picture. So they're going to use cognitive skills of language to express just how they made their picture and what they want to say about it. Physical. Children use their small muscle skills to paint, write, glue, use clay, and make collages. Our fine muscle skills are the skills that are involved in our hands, in our fingers, and using our fingers together, in grasping something, in holding something, in pressing something. So when children do process-oriented art activities, they're able to use paintbrushes and pencils and markers and all sorts of different things that help them to develop their fine muscle skills. Fine muscle skills are very important because we use them throughout our lives. We use them to zip our coat, to button our shirt. We use them for typing if we're writing a paper or something like that. We use them for the all-important texting. So physical skills, especially fine motor skills in art, is a very important thing that we develop. We have covered a lot so far. Right now, we're going to talk about some tips for offering process-focused art for children in our classrooms. I encourage you to approach art like open-ended play. For example, provide a variety of materials and see what happens as the child leads the art experience. So I don't necessarily have an idea of what I think kids are going to do with it, but I provide the materials like the potato stampers that we saw or other kitchen utensils, and we see just what children do with it. So it's open-ended play. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. There's exploration and having fun learning with the materials. Make art a joyful experience. Let children use more paint, more colors, and make more and more artwork. We don't want to restrict artwork and say, oh, we can only do one. We want to make it a joyful experience where children can do as much as they want to do. You're going to find a lot of individual differences in this. Sometimes art isn't really a kid's thing. They might do a little bit, and then they go back to housekeeping, or they go back to building with Legos, or they go back to what is of interest to them at that time. Other children, art may be their thing. They may sit and do picture after picture after picture after picture. We really want to follow children's lead in that and make sure that they can experience joy in learning, whether it's in art or whether it's joy in building with Legos. Provide plenty of time for children to carry out their plans and explorations. So all of learning with young children requires time. If children are building a block structure, we want to give them adequate time for really exploring, really getting into their block structure. Same thing with art. We want to give them plenty of time to carry out plans and explore the materials. Next one is let children come and go from their art at will. So the experience that we looked at just now were things that a teacher would introduce on a day. Today we're going to paint with corn on the cob. So the teacher would introduce that, and we want to make it such that children can come and do a little bit, then they can go do something else, then they can come back and do more. It's just one of the different activities that are available to them. And what we've focused on so far are teacher-presented art experiences that the teacher would have a different thing each day, maybe a couple different ones a week, and so on. But we also want to have in classrooms for young children an art table so they can always do art there. There's always going to be materials available. Children can come and do whatever kind of art they want to do with the materials that are provided each and every day for them. Another tip for teachers is to notice and comment on what you see. You might say, look at all the yellow dots you painted, or I see you've used a lot of blue, or I noticed that you have some orange on your paper, but I only see red and yellow paint. So we're going to notice and comment on what we see kids doing. And we want to be able to have a yes classroom. A yes classroom is one where we're able to say, yep, let's do that. That's a good idea. So we want to be able to have a yes classroom with children where we can affirm the ideas that they have. Some more teacher tips. offer new and interesting art materials for kids. The pictures that I showed you earlier were all things that I found on Pinterest. The World Wide Web is a great place for us to do that. You can simply Google process-oriented art activities, and you're going to see a lot of creative things that you can offer for kids. So be sure and offer new and interesting materials for children's exploration. Here again, play music in the background. Make it soothing, make it peppy, whatever you want, whatever kind of atmosphere you want to make happen, you can involve music in the background. Take art materials outside in the natural light. Some child care centers focus on having an outdoor classroom where kids can do the same things outside as they could inside. In the center where I worked, we had a block area outside where we had a large platform where kids could build blocks whenever they wanted to, so they could do block building inside our classrooms and outside on our playground. Art is the same way. We had an outdoor easel, so when kids wanted to paint outside, they could paint outside. We also had some tables outside, so we were able to take various art activities outside, and kids could explore outside. Outside is kind of neat because you have the breeze, you have just the fresh air outside. You can sometimes do messier things outside. I remember one time doing an activity in the summertime where the kids were actually wearing swimsuits because we had little splash pools, little wading pools for them. But this was an activity where we had some balls and we had some paint, and the kids could dip the ball in the paint, and then they could bounce the ball on the sidewalk. So it made for some fun times, some neat experiences, some neat exploration, because we were doing process-oriented art activities outside. Another thing is to let the children choose whether their art goes home or stays in the classroom. So sometimes we want to have a bulletin board of children's art activities. So this is something that the teacher wants to do, but sometimes the children might say, well, I want to take that home. So we could do that. We could, give the child that choice. Or we could also say, hey, I really would like to have an art gallery here at school. Would it be okay if you make one to go home and one that we could put in our art gallery? And most of the time children would say yes, because they would like that affirmation of having their art shown in your art gallery in your classroom. Also remember, it's the children's art, not yours, so they really get to choose where it goes. Just like we're letting them choose what they want to make, it's their art activity, not my art activity. All right, next we're going to look at 10 additional process art ideas. Number one is easel painting with a variety of paints and paintbrushes with no directions. So the child has the easel, they've got paint, they've got paintbrushes. One thing that I was taught very early in my early childhood career was the smaller the child, the bigger the brush. So small children need paintbrushes that have very broad handles just so they can hold it well, and then as children get older you can use finer paintbrushes with them. Another idea is watercolor painting. We probably all did this in elementary school, but watercolor painting is fun for kids. Exploring and creating with clay, or exploring and creating with Play-Doh. So sometimes we want to give children's art experiences that go in 3 dimensions. When we paint on a piece of paper, it goes in 2 dimensions. It goes across and it goes vertically. However, when they explore with clay or Play-Doh, they're building in 3 different directions, so we want to provide that. We also want to provide different kinds of materials similar that children can use to have 3-dimensional art. Next one shown here is finger painting. Finger painting is a blast. Some kids will really get into finger painting, and some kids don't like to get messy like that. So you want to be sensitive to the kids in your classroom. Sometimes if kids just don't want to do the messy, but it looks fun, we could offer for them to wear little plastic gloves like we would use in food service so they can experience finger painting, but be okay with the messy part of it. Painting with unusual tools like toothbrushes, paint rollers, potato mashers, etc. So look around your house, look around our classroom, and see what looks fun to paint with. Painting and stamping is another, or printing and stamping is another one. So stamps can be purchased or made with sponges. So I have had purchased sponges, and they might have different geometrical shapes on them. They might have the letters of the alphabet on them, so kids can stamp with those things. Or you can make stamps using sponges that the kids can dip in paint and then paint on whatever you want to paint on. Creating spin art using a record player and paint, squirt bottles, paintbrushes, or markers. So this is an illustration. A record player is something that we used a long time ago, where a record would go on it, a disc that would spin around, and a needle somehow made music from that. So now, since we don't use those anymore, we could put a paper plate on it. It would spin around, and then the child would use a marker, paint, whatever, to make spin art using that. I've also used salad spinners, which are these things that you're meant to put lettuce and salad in and spin it around to kind of I think get the water off of it is the purpose, but you could use salad spinners for creating spin art. Stringing beads independently and creatively, kind of an art activity. It's a fine motor skill, definitely. So kids could string beads. Drawing with pencils, art, pens, various sizes of markers and crayons. So just the basic drawing. As I talked about earlier, you'll want to have an art center set up in your classroom that has all these things so children can explore any day of the week whenever they want to. Another fun thing to do is to make collages. So you can provide tissue paper, different kinds of paper, glue, paste, glue sticks, scissors, recycled materials, all kinds of different things that you can think of so that the kids can create collages. All right. Well, we have talked a lot about art. This will be a point in class where we'd answer any questions you might have. So hope you learned a lot about art, and happy creating art with young children.